Hello everyone, I'm here today to do a tag, and I was tagged in this ages ago. It's a ratings and reviews tag, and this was originally created by Scott and Nelle from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, but I was tagged by Convey there, as I said ages ago. Um, so let's just get into the questions. The first question is to tag people, and because this was ages ago, I'm not going to tag anyone. I think afterwards there are some question about naming some channels, so whoever I name, you're tagged. Um, the second question is, how do you know if you have finished a good book? Is it a thinking or a feelings response? So for me, the main thing that tells me that I finished a favorite book is if I immediately want to reread it. If I'm so overwhelmed by everything that happened and my mind was blown enough that I want to reread that book immediately. That's my definition of a good book. I think a good book should be one that you want to reread, one that should be reread. So nothing that depends on you not knowing the plot. If that, you know what I mean, like a mystery would never be a really favorite good book for me, because if I reread it, I need to feel that it is worth rereading. But yeah, I don't know if immediately wanting to reread a book is a thinking thing or a feeling thing, but that's how I determine that a book is good, and it's a 5 star maybe. The third question is, when you begin to form your review or rating, what is the first question you ask yourself? So usually when I'm going to review a book, what I think about is the things that I liked and the things I didn't like, and I have several categories in which I use to determine if that's good or bad. So, for example, the plot or the character development or the language, things like that. I start thinking when I'm reading, okay, do I like the language? Is there something special about it? Or where is the plot going? Do I know where the plot is going? Am I bored of the plot? Or if the characters are characters that I can connect with or not? Those are the kind of things that I'm thinking when I'm reading a book and I want to review it. The fourth question is, do you do star ratings? Why or why not? And this has subcategories. So first I'm going to answer that. I do star ratings, but I don't share them with people. And that's because I think that star ratings are valuable for me personally. For example, if I'm doing my favorite books of the year, or I'm collecting books to talk about in a certain recommendations video, it's useful for me to, instead of going through every book I've read, just go to the 4 and 5 stars I've read and see if there's something there that I want to talk about. So it is useful for me in that sense, but I don't think it's useful for anybody, because these are very subjective scales, and if I say a book is 2 stars, it will mean something completely different to me that to other person. So I don't see the value on sharing that with people that will not have the same star rating as me. So yeah, that's what I do. So the 4A is, if yes, explain your star rating system, and is your star rating consistent? So I try to make my star rating consistent, but there is such a thing as the right book at the right time. So it can never be 100% objective. Reading is a subjective thing, and you're a different person when you read a book from another book. So some books are going to impact you differently depending on the time that you read them in your life, and that is also has to be reflected in the star rating. And for my star rating, so I only give 5 stars to books that are going to be favorites of all time. That's why I'm saying I don't share them normally, because I think most people give 5 stars to a relatively high amount of books in my in my um, in my view. Like, if they don't have anything wrong, or if they really enjoyed a book, they give it 5 stars. That's not 5 stars for me. 5 stars for me is a book that really changed the way that I am and the way that I think about the world. And some years I don't give any 5 stars out, and some years I give 2 or 3. But I I don't use them very often because I just want to reserve them for the books that I really, really love and the books that changed my life. Um, and then 4 stars is books that I really enjoy and I think are worth reading and I will recommend to everybody. 3-star books are books that were okay, that I enjoy as I was reading, but I don't have particular feelings about. 2 stars are for those books that are in the middle of the road, and I have to say as well that um, Storygraph allows for 0 stars, so my middle is 2.5, not 3. So 2 is books that, yeah, I could have not read and I will be perfectly happy not having read them, but I think also it's not a waste of time. 1 star is for books that I actively did not like, and 0 stars is for actively offensive books. Like if a book is really racist or really sexist or something like that, that's the kind of book that will get 0 stars. And then the 4.B is if you said no to, do you give star ratings? What language do you use to convey the quality of a book in your reviews? Does it form an informal rating or ranking? I mean, of course, if you see one of my reviews, you will kind of guess the range of stars I would have gone for. Like if I say a lot of good things about a book, of course you'll think it's a 4 or 5 star. And if I say a lot of bad things about a book, then you will think, oh, this is not a very high rating. But I don't know if there is words that I use specifically, because what I try to do in my reviews is to give you all the information about all the different aspects of a book so that you can form an opinion of if you personally will like it. Because if I tell you the language had nothing special in it, then you might think, oh, this, I don't care. I read for plot or I read for other things. But if you are someone that really reads for the language, then you will not pick up that book. So I think that's why I don't give my star ratings, because I think that you can get more out of a review if you look at the actual things that a person liked and didn't like, or things that make the book special or not, um, rather than just a number that is very personal to that person and the experience of that person. And if you don't have the exact same life experiences and taste as that person, you still don't know if you are going to like that book or not. So do I use language? I guess so, but I think that I give people the freedom to decide if the categories that I give good ratings for are things that they need or not need, if that makes sense. The 5th question is, do you believe every book has a perfect reader? Does this contradict the idea that a book can be bad? Yes, I think every book has a reader, and no, that does not contradict the fact that there are bad books. I think that every book, everyone looks for something different on a book. So the fact that, again, if a book doesn't have beautiful language, but it's a very nice romance and very cheesy and sweet, someone will need that at some point. But I think there are things as bad books, because I mean, there is the obvious fact that a book might be, let's say, racist, and that's objectively, to me, a bad book. But there will be a racist person that enjoys that book. So the fact that there's a person that enjoys that book doesn't mean that that book should not exist and that book is bad. So yeah, I don't know if the idea of a bad book, because of the way it's written or because of the characters or so, something like that, is necessarily a universal thing. But I think there are things in books that make them absolutely bad and should not exist, but still they will have readers that will want those things. That does not mean that we should give them to them. The sixth question is, what book that you hated have you recommended? And again, I don't think I have recommended any book that I have hated, because I I don't tend to hate books. Like if I'm not enjoying a book because the plot or whatever it's too boring for me, I'll just move to something else. But I will not recommend it to people. But I will also not deter people from reading it. But the ones that I actually absolutely hate are books that have very offensive things in them. That's the books that I normally hate, and I will never recommend a book that has offensive things in them. Like if a book is racist or sexist or homophobic, I'm never going to recommend that. And that's the books that I normally hate. So, no, I don't recommend books that I hate. Question 7 is, what makes a good book bad? Question 7 is, what makes a book good, bad, or great by your evaluation? So, as I said, if I want to reread it immediately as I finished it, that's great. If But on terms of what I need for a book to do that, normally they are books that change me as a person, not just as a reader, but as a person. So books that normally contain a lot of social issues. And again, that does not mean that every book that has social issues in them I'm going to enjoy. There has been a trend in the last few years to make a lot of books about the environment or the LGBTQI plus community or women's power or whatever, just because they are trendy things and they sell. Um, and there has been an overproduction of those books, and many of those are, in my eyes, not particularly good because they're not doing things with the depth that I like to see in books. So, in that sense, I don't think that those books are good because they don't have depth in them. But if you look at the books that I have loved in the last few years, all of them contain some form of social commentary. So I think it's a necessary thing for me to love a book, but it's not a book. It's not the thing that is sufficient to make a good book. I think um, depth is another thing that I need, and I need to connect with the book, either by the characters if it's a novel, or by the way that non-fiction books are approached. I need to connect with the book in a more emotional level, I think, and that normally is done by, yeah, again, by depth or by character development. I need to understand why we're going where we're going. Um, so yeah, I think that's what makes for me a good book. Question 8 is, when evaluating the quality of a book, do you have specific criteria or aspects of the book, such as character development, that you consider? Does this change if you are writing an in-depth review or just thinking about the book for enjoyment? And yes, as I said, there are several categories of things that I consider when I'm doing a review. So like plot, character development, language, social impact, topics, things like that that I look at, especially if I'm doing a review. Um, if I'm reviewing a book, I probably will look at things a little bit closer, but especially if it's a book that is being judged for a prize, or I am judging for a prize, because in that case, if I'm reading it for the Booker, for example, or for the BookTube prize, I'm reading it to compare with other books, and then I am more harsh in my judgment of a book because I have to put it against other books, and then it's like, okay, this book in itself it's good, but if I compare it to all of these other books, is it better, is it worse? And that's, I think, what affects my reading of a book the most, if I'm judging it rather than reviewing it just. Question 9 is, do you consider star rating on or average ratings when choosing books to read or add to your TBR? Depends. So if I am seeing a book that someone is reviewing that it sounds amazing to me and the person is saying good things about the book, then I would add it to my TBR regardless of the average star rating or whatever that it has in Storygraph. But if I'm looking for a book to read for a specific project and I haven't heard um, anyone's review on it, for example, if I'm looking for a book from Panama for the Invisible Cities project, then I have a couple of options that are available to me. I don't have a lot of options. Um, then I might look at the average ratings that it has in Storygraph or Goodreads or whatever, because there is not those books are normally quite obscure and there's not so much information about those. So to choose between one or the other, I normally do look at star ratings and see which one is higher, because that's one of the few pieces of information I have to make that decision. Question then is, who on BookTube does reliable and interesting reviews on books that you can use to decide if a book is for you or not? So I think Courtney had a very good point in this question, and she said that there are two types of people that you can use for this. You can use people that you have such a similar reading taste to, that whatever they read and like, you probably are going to like as well. And for that, I have Lauren from Reading with Macquarie. I think we have quite similar taste and quite similar ideas about everything. Um, so I think that she is a reliable person, that she could just tell me, read this, you're gonna like it, and I will read it. And she makes amazing reviews as well, apart from that I will read whatever she gives me. She does make very good reviews, so that strengthens the will to read whatever she recommends. And the other category that Courtney had was people that make such in-depth, thoughtful reviews that you can decide if a book is for you or not based on what they say. And I think for that, there are two people that I follow and really appreciate the reviews. The first one is Kieran from KD Books. He has the funniest reviews, but also super informative. I can really know if a book is for me or not from the reviews that he makes. And he has very different tastes from me. He has a lot of books that he reads that I would never read. When he reviews a book that I like the sound of, he really convinces me to pick it up, and I normally like it. And the other person is Nicole from Nicole is Here to Learn. She makes super in-depth reviews of especially non-fiction books, and I really, really appreciate her reviews. She's really, really thoughtful. And so yeah, and also the thing that I like about these three people is that they read books that are not the last trend, the hypest. They don't write with the hype. They sometimes read things that are new, but most of the times they just go with the flow of what they want to read rather than what the latest release is. Because I think that often people in BookTube get wrapped into the hype of new books and give high ratings of new books that are not necessarily that amazing just because they are new and there is this emotion around them. Then they like them, but it's not that they are not genuine, but they haven't stopped to think enough maybe to make the recommendation simply because the book is good and separated from the hype. And the last question is that does that or those booktubers use different language than you to evaluate and review the overall quality of a book? I think in some sense we have similar styles, especially for Lauren. I think we have similar styles to review books. I think Nicole has a lot of deep thoughts and maybe not research, but like comparison with other things that she has done and read, which I wish I would do more of. Sometimes I just read a book and talk about it, and I don't think about the connections of a book with other books and other movements and things, and I wish I did that more. And Kieran, I think we use different language because he's just so funny. I wish I could be as funny as he is, but yeah, I think we have different language for that as well because he is also very knowledgeable. He reads a lot of stuff for his PhD as well. So he has a lot more knowledge on the history and the background behind things, um, and I really appreciate that as well from his reviews. So yeah, there are not exactly the similar styles, but there are things that I wish I did um, if I had the time and the knowledge for it. But yeah, those are my answers to all these questions. I hope you enjoyed. Um, Let me know in the comments below if you have different opinions from me or you have any opinions at all about ratings and star ratings and all of that stuff. And until next video, bye!